She truly despised William Frawley. Now we finally know why. Right now, Hollywood's obsession with classic TV is back in full force. The CW just launched a nostalgia docuseries called TV We Love, and its very first episode is devoted entirely to I Love Lucy, proof that, more than 70 years later, the world still cannot get enough of Lucy, Ricky, and the Mertzes. But here's the thing the glossy retrospectives tend to gloss over: the woman who played Ethel Mertz didn't just dislike her on-screen husband. Vivian Vance loathed William Frawley, and the feeling was entirely mutual. Power pop. The closer you look at what actually happened on Stage 24 at Desilu Studios, the more you realize that one of television's most beloved partnerships was secretly a 9-year psychological war. Two different worlds. To understand why this feud exploded the way it did, you have to understand that Vivian Vance and William Frawley didn't just come from different towns. They came from entirely different centuries of show business. William Frawley was born in 1887 and had appeared in more than 100 films over the next 35 years before television even existed. Wikipedia: he was a product of the old vaudeville circuit, a brutal world where you lived out of a suitcase, played to rowdy crowds, and developed a skin thick enough to stop a freight train. By the time I Love Lucy came along, acting was simply a job to him: show up, say the lines, hit the racetrack. He was also a notorious misanthrope with a fondness for the bottle, a fact serious enough that Desi Arnaz placed a sobriety clause in his contract, stipulating that if Frawley missed a single day of work due to drinking, he was done. Wikipedia. Then you have Vivian Vance, 22 years younger, who had fought to be taken seriously as a Broadway actress. For Vance, acting was an art form that demanded emotional precision and a safe, supportive environment. She was also a woman who took enormous pride in her appearance, a natural beauty who felt the industry constantly underestimated her. When Desi Arnaz came calling with the role of Ethel Mertz, she was at a crossroads. She wanted to be a leading lady. Instead, she was being asked to play the frumpy neighbor to the most glamorous woman on television. To pull off Ethel, Vance wore clothes intentionally 2 sizes too small, dowdy floral prints, and enough padding to ruin her silhouette. She was already sacrificing her vanity for the paycheck. Then she got a look at William Frawley. The spark that started the fire. According to Greg Oppenheimer, the son of I Love Lucy's producer Jess Oppenheimer, things first went sour when Frawley overheard Vance complaining that no one would ever believe she was married to that old man. The thing she didn't whisper it at lunch. She said it out loud, within earshot of a man whose ego had been forged in decades of show business combat. Frawley, who already had zero patience for what he considered theatrical types from New York, decided in that moment that Vance was a prima donna who needed to be taken down a peg. He didn't see a colleague anymore. He saw a target. He had a biting wit honed in the trenches of vaudeville, and he started using it as a weapon. He retaliated by lobbying the writers for lines that described Ethel as having a figure like a sack of doorknobs, and a long list of other insults followed from there. The things meanwhile, Vance would call his character Old Fat Freddy on camera. A full-scale insult war was underway, and it was just getting started. Their working styles made everything worse. Vance was a perfectionist who dealt with serious clinical anxiety. Today we'd recognize them as panic attacks. She needed a calm, supportive environment to find her funny. Frawley, on the other hand, was a one-take wonder with zero interest in rehearsals. He'd show up with his lines barely memorized, leaning on natural grumpiness to carry him through. When Vance asked for another take to nail a specific beat, Frawley would mock her openly, calling her the girl who couldn't act or making snide cracks about her Broadway airs. He knew exactly how to rattle her, and he did it deliberately. The irony of hateful chemistry. Here is where the story gets truly strange. The more they loathed each other, the more America fell in love with them. The writers at I Love Lucy weren't blind to what was happening. They realized that when Ethel gave Fred that narrow-eyed glare, Vivian Vance wasn't entirely acting. The raw irritation was genuine, and it gave the Mertzes a grit that couldn't be manufactured in a writer's room. While Lucy and Ricky were the glamorous, high-energy heart of the show, Fred and Ethel were the reality check, the couple that had been married so long they communicated entirely in eye rolls and heavy sighs. Audiences found it electrifying. Vance herself was quoted saying, "Whenever I received a new script, I raced through it, praying there wasn't a scene where we had to be in bed together." Power pop, and yet those scenes, precisely because of her visible discomfort and his deliberate aggravation, became some of the most relatable moments in the show's history. Frawley weaponized his own hygiene and his cantankerous persona to keep her in a constant state of low-grade agitation. Her genuine reactions, the flushing cheeks, the set jaw, the spark of real anger, were comedy gold for the cameras. The producers loved it. The more they fought, the higher the ratings climbed. Off camera, however, the situation was deteriorating badly. Before each episode, Frawley would read the script with the cast, then remove only his pages and discard the rest, studying nothing beyond his own lines. Wikipedia backstage, they were standing on opposite sides of doors waiting for entrances without uttering a single syllable to each other. The second the director yelled action, they were Fred and Ethel. The second it ended, they were strangers who happened to share a paycheck. This toggle switch existence started taking a serious toll on Vance's mental health. She began to feel she couldn't escape Ethel or Frawley. She was becoming synonymous with a character she felt was beneath her, perpetually married to a man who actively enjoyed making her miserable. The war goes underground. By the middle of the show's run, the conflict had evolved beyond insults and into psychological gamesmanship. The soundstage became divided territory. Frawley, knowing Vance was a perfectionist, would intentionally go rogue during rehearsals, mumbling lines, staring into space while she poured her heart into a scene. It was his way of telling her she wasn't important enough to deserve his full attention. Vance was no passive victim. She was a brilliant comedic actress who knew exactly how to use her screen time to sideline him. She'd position herself to take the light, or add a tiny piece of physical business, fixing her hair, adjusting a prop right as Frawley was supposed to deliver a punchline. In the world of multi-camera sitcoms, these are professional stabs in the dark. Both actors were constantly lobbying the writers for better material and more wins over the other character. The insult war wasn't just happening on set, it was playing out on the page, with both actors fighting for every inch of territory in the script. The thing's ironically, this ongoing battle for fairness is exactly what made Fred and Ethel feel like a real marriage to viewers. They gave as good as they got, and that balance was only there because the actors were genuinely at war. Lucille Ball, caught in the middle, tried to mediate, but it was like putting out a forest fire with a squirt gun. She loved Vivian deeply, they were genuine best friends who shared a rare comedic shorthand. But she also had a protective soft spot for Frawley, respecting his veteran status and his reliability on set. When Vance came to her dressing room in tears because Frawley had mocked her singing voice or commented cruelly on her weight and her Ethel costumes, Ball would tell her to ignore him and soldier on for the sake of the show. Desi tried a different approach, taking Frawley out to the track or for drinks to smooth things over. It rarely worked for long. The rejection that ended everything. By the late 50s, I Love Lucy wasn't just a sitcom, it was a cultural institution. Recognizing that the Mertzes were nearly as popular as the Ricardos, Desi Arnaz offered Frawley and Vance their very own spin-off series, with a salary of $50,000 on the table, enough to buy several luxury homes at the time. Wikipedia. For Frawley, the answer was obvious. He was in his 70s, his health was beginning to show the wear of a lifetime in smoky bars and drafty theaters, and he wasn't about to turn down a guaranteed income. He didn't care that he hated Vivian. He cared about the racetrack, his bank account, and his legacy as a working actor. He waited for her to sign on. He had badly underestimated her misery. Vance declined immediately, mainly because she had no desire to work with Frawley on a one-on-one basis, and she also felt the Mertz characters simply wouldn't work without the Ricardos to anchor them. Wikipedia. She reportedly told Desi she wouldn't work with that man again if he paved the streets with gold. For Vance, the end of I Love Lucy was a parole date. No amount of money was worth another season of psychological warfare. When word reached Frawley that the spin-off was dead because of Vivian's refusal, his resentment hardened into cold fury. To him, she had reached into his pocket and stolen his future. He never forgave her, and he made sure everyone in Hollywood knew that Vance had ruined a perfectly good opportunity for both of them. Wikipedia. Separate lives, permanent scars. They went their separate ways with a sense of relief on one side and bitter abandonment on the other. Vance moved on to The Lucy Show, where she made it a contractual requirement that her character, Vivian Bagley, would be stylish, independent, and, critically, without a husband to bicker with. Wikipedia: it was a deliberate, professional middle finger to the years she had spent in Ethel's housecoats. Frawley landed on my three sons as the grumpy grandfather figure Bub O'Casey, beloved by the young cast members. But the bitterness never left him. He was often seen at his favorite table at Musso and Frank Grill, grumbling about the Broadway amateur who had cost him his own show. They never reconciled. There were no tearful phone calls, no lunches to bury the hatchet. They existed in a state of permanent icy avoidance. On March 3, 1966, Frawley suffered a fatal heart attack while walking along Hollywood Boulevard and died on the sidewalk, not far from the Walk of Fame where his star is cemented. IMDb: when the news reached Vivian Vance, she was dining at a restaurant with her husband. According to witnesses, she did not cry. She did not offer a eulogy. She simply said, "Champagne for everyone." Power pop. Vance herself continued to work sporadically before passing away in 1979 at the age of 70, after battling breast cancer and a stroke. Wikipedia: in her final years, she spoke about "I Love Lucy" with a complicated mixture of pride and pain. She knew she had helped create something immortal. She also knew exactly what it had cost her. And now, as a brand new generation of TV fans discovers these stories through docuseries like TV We Love, the real lesson of Fred and Ethel Mertz is becoming clearer than ever. The most authentic-looking love on screen was powered by something the audience never suspected: a cold, calculated, deeply personal hatred that neither of them ever fully escaped.